Hello, School Transportation Nation. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Tony Corcoran, publisher and president of STN. It's brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software. Also, our sponsors are IC Bus and Safely. We'll be hearing today from a Colorado transportation director and one of his school bus drivers who started driving for the district when he was 19 years old. The wonderful Taylor Akpatani is going to be talking with them just a little bit later in the episode. But before we get to that, I want to bring on Mr. Ryan Gray, editor extraordinaire. Ryan, what is happening lately out there in the world of school transportation?
Well, sad news. I think everybody in the nation knows what's been going on out in Hawaii on the island of Maui, the county of Maui, with those fires. Something, Tony, that we've dealt with a lot here in California. A fair portion of the mainland, especially out west, deals with these raging forest fires and wildfires seemingly every summer and fall. They've descended upon the islands. Deadly, 55 dead as we're recording this podcast. The Lahaina town, that historic whaling town, the historical capital of King Kamehameha's island kingdom, decimated, just in ashes. It's so sad. School has been closed on the island basically most of last week. They were looking to see if they could start opening as of Monday. Been in touch with Hawaii Department of Education. As you can imagine, Tony, that it's with the mass destruction there, they're still literally sifting through the ashes. They're still trying to identify bodies. They're trying to find residents who are missing. The death toll is going to skyrocket. The governor of Hawaii called it the worst natural disaster in island's history. There was 61 people who were killed by a tsunami in the 1960s. This death toll is likely going to surpass that. In terms of school busing, again, some of the details are scant so far. Was talking to one of the largest school bus contractors on the island. They lost an office and a parking lot with 8 school buses that were parked in Lahaina. Still trying to get more details on any further damage. But basically, if it was in and around Lahaina, it's probably in ruins. It's one of about 3 or 4 fires that were still raging on the island. The town of Kihei on the southern coast was being impacted. The Kahului airport had thousands of people stranded, folks that were coming in. Obviously it's a big tourist time. Folks coming in and didn't have a hotel to go to. And then, of course, just the residents. So we're still trying to figure out what's going on now. In Hawaii, their school busing is mainly special needs. So all the schools, as I mentioned last week, were closed except for 2. There was a elementary school and a high school in Hana, which is on the east coast of Maui. They remained open because they were far enough away from the smoke and the fires. But obviously, no school buses running. The students with special needs, obviously, a lot of them have health conditions already. So, with the choking smoke, just not a good time for the Hawaiian people and the residents. So our hearts and our prayers go out to them right now.
Yeah, Ryan, I'll second that. I know we've got lots of friends that go to the STN Expo, the guys at Ground Transport. You got Roberts. There's other contractors in the Hawaii Islands, which, it's a big family. School transportation, Hawaii, but lots of family businesses, lots of families out there that are being impacted. So definitely a rough start to school and definitely just a disaster that is just horrible. And, really our hearts go out to them, like you said. And I know we have one of our events planners, Miss Denise Banks, her brother lives in Maui, and she was giving us a play-by-play on what was going on out there from a resident's standpoint. So we were just getting more information from her as well. So I'm sure we'll have more updates for you guys in School Transportation Nation with this. It's a developing story. Keep an eye on the website. I know Ryan is working on a story for stnonline.com. So we'll keep you updated as we know more and kind of keep things going. But thanks a lot, Ryan, for sharing that update. Before we dive into more headlines, going to bring you an ad from On Command Connection. Hey guys, we've got a great tech tip this week brought to you by IC Bus. You're looking for ways to improve your on-time performance and reduce operating costs? All IC Bus CE series school buses now come standard with factory installed telematics devices, including a 5-year connectivity subscription. Customers gain access to on-command connection, an industry-leading remote diagnostic solution, providing data that is visible and easy to understand and actionable. With OCC, your school district will have visibility to vehicle health and performance data at your fingertips, including EV-specific information like state of charge and estimated range. You guys can learn more about other standard capabilities of IC connected vehicles at icbus.com. That's icbus.com. All right, we're back. Thanks, IC Bus, for giving us that ad. Excellent conversations. Ryan, want to continue? So we saw Bluebird came out with their earnings and they beat the street on estimates. So Ryan, you have an update for us on what's happening at Bluebird and their recovery? I guess they had plans. They were struggling. They bounced back and things are headed in a good direction.
Yeah, they're saying their turnaround is completed. So we know that they have new leadership in the company or renewed leadership, perhaps. We've mentioned earlier this summer, that Phil Horlock returned as CEO, and Britton Smith was elevated from chief strategy officer, basically, and overseeing the EV expansion to president. So he's likely waiting in the wings there to eventually take the CEO spot as well. Basically the company's saying that their unit sales are almost 25% higher than a year ago. And really pointing to an exceptional third quarter where they had 43% increase in sales. That's quite a bit. So definitely the expansion with electric buses. Of course, they're a leader in propane as well. They just recently started completing the plans for their new electric vehicle plant. So a lot of big things happening at Bluebird and the OEMs in general. A lot of it buoyed, of course, by the EPA Clean School Bus Program funds. Here in a matter of a week or a week and a half or so, we're closing the applications for the competitive grant. So a lot of units out there, Tony, a lot of folks ramping up with electric buses, a lot of healthy orders out there.
Yeah, and on the downside, I know we got a notification that electrification company Proterra filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So that caught our eye because obviously they have units deployed in the field. And my big question was, what does that mean for the customers? How does that impact people? What are the implications of this Chapter 11 bankruptcy or reorganization? And how does it really look? Because, Brian, this is something that we are always concerned about with respect to what's the impact of new companies entering the market. There's a lot of technology. It's very speculative in a lot of ways. School districts are investing millions of dollars. Obviously, it's grant money to some degree, but regardless, they don't want to have buses that are electric buses and not be able to charge them because they can't get the service and support. That's a concern for me. I see this as something everybody's really excited about electric, but this is you need companies to support you, and if they're here today, gone tomorrow, that's touch and go to me. Now, granted, Proterra will probably come out of this just fine, but it kind of just points a bright light on, creating some doubt in the market on what picking the right partners, basically, is kind of what the moral of that story is.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of new companies in the space. And a lot of folks I've talked with, they've expressed that concern as well. Well, some of these new companies that we're seeing, I mean, every trade show, Tony, there's these new companies that we'd never heard of before that are now in this electric space, especially. And will they be here tomorrow? I think you're right with Proterra. I mean, this is a company that's been around for 20 years. And they have a very rich history with electrification, and especially on the transit bus side. That's where they got their start. So this is not some fly-by-night company. And we also have to remember that they have a lot of very strong partners in the school bus and in the trucking space. Daimler Trucks comes to mind. Proterra obviously is the battery, and up until next year, still driving the electric Julie for Thomas Built buses. Thomas Built, of course, is going to be moving over to the Blue Horizon, which is the Meritor product, which Cummins now owns. So but Proterra is continuing to provide the battery pack for the Thomas bus. And one analyst who I was in contact with last week, kind of talk about speculative, he mentioned that he thinks that the company could be ripe for the pickings, and have Daimler be the suitor there. Have Daimler acquire the company. Now, again, we'll have to see how this all shakes out. Chapter 11 is different than Chapter 7. There's actually several chapters of bankruptcy, right? The ones we normally hear about are Chapter 11, which is, in this case, a reorganization. So Proterra is not shuttering its doors. Now, there have been a lot of layoffs over the past several months as they've been trying to trim that fat, and they've been trying to get more efficient and try to cut costs and try to avoid Chapter 11. It's much better than Chapter 7, which would be liquidation, right? And that's kind of, it's going out for sale and a big sell-off.
Yeah, nobody wants the creditors knocking at the door, selling off all your office furniture.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think Proterra will emerge from this in some way, shape, or form, whether it be Proterra or maybe it'll be a brand of a existing OEM. Perhaps we'll have to see. But you're dead right, Tony. The concern about, anytime you have a new technology and you have new companies coming to the stage with their takes on this new technology, how is that technology going to prove out? What's going to be, the warranty and the ongoing service? Topics that we're talking about in our upcoming September issue, especially around alternative vehicles and electric vehicles. So, the jury's still out on exactly how the Proterra situation is going to pan out, but likely they'll emerge, reorg, and then move forward. But it was a question that I had, and I was never not predicting that they were going to go into Chapter 11. But even when Thomas Built Buses and Daimler announced a couple years ago that they were moving the electric drive over to the Blue Horizon, my question was to Proterra, well, what does this mean for you guys, at least in the school bus space? And we do know, again, that they have a lot of business in the transit bus space. But, these things have ripple effects. So I think we might be seeing a bit of that. And it'll just be interesting to see if someone comes and saves the day and buys them out.
All right, before we get some more headlines, we have a message from SafeFleet. Hey guys, SafeFleet is the company that's driving safety forward and helps you prevent illegal passing. Their cutting-edge illegal passing suite protects lives by using advanced cameras and sensors to detect violators around school buses. Real-time alerts ensure swift action, while seamless connectivity enables efficient communication with authorities. Encrypted data ensures privacy, and easy integration reduces setup costs. Customizable options suit every community's needs, promoting awareness, deterring illegal passing incidents. To join the movement for safer roads to protect children today, visit safefleet.net. That's safefleet.net.
Well, and Tony, in other business news last week, Zonar Systems announced their new CEO, Michael Gould. A lot of you folks out there in the nation, that'll be a familiar name to you. Michael actually has been with Zonar for the last 5 years as COO, so he's now elevated to CEO. So Michael, he has 20 years of experience with SaaS-based business, so he's a perfect guy to be leading Zonar moving forward. Past stops on Michael's resume, he's been at Hewlett-Packard, he's been at Oracle, so it's definitely a guy who knows his way around software and development. Also, too, joining the ranks at Zonar. They have a new CFO as well. We met him, Chris McFadden. He was out in Reno to take in STN Expo in July, and could tell he was having a great time out there and getting his feet wet in the school bus and trucking industries. So Chris actually comes over from Amazon. He was heading up their robotics division, and he was their director of ops and strategy for packaging innovation. So he is their new CFO, as well as senior vice president of finance and accounting. So I want to welcome Chris and Michael to the fold. And then, a lot of news coming out of Seattle recently with Zonar. Of course, earlier this year, they named industry vet Tim Ammon, a good friend of the nation, as vice president and general manager of their passenger services division. So that's overseeing specifically school buses. So a lot of leadership news coming out of Seattle with Zonar. So be interesting to see what's next for those guys. Of course, a member of the Continental family. And as we start to plan out our STN Expo East, which will be one more year in Indianapolis next June, but then we're going to be transitioning to Charlotte, and just on the other side of the state lines there down in South Carolina. That's where Continental's headquarters are. So looking forward to potentially working with them as well. And speaking of conferences, Tony, this week, days away, folks, is your last chance to secure $100 off of TSD conference registration with our super early bird deal. So that's Friday, August 18th. So again, you have days to take advantage of that before the price goes up. The agenda is in development. We already have some sneak peek previews on the website. Go over to tsdconference.com, click on agendas. We have our keynotes, Ben Springer on Thursday, November 16th, teaching kind of an overview of his Aspen on the school bus program, managing aggressive behavior. So he's going to be giving a keynote and then giving a top level view of that training. Coming the next day, Friday, November 17th, we have our special needs legal expert, Betsy Helfrich, returning. I have a special session coming up right after that on Sue Savage v. Bucks Intermediate Schools Then and Now. So some of you folks might remember that hallmark case in student transportation back to the 1999, late 90s, kind of blending into the early 2000s. This tragic case of this little girl who choked to death on the school bus because her CSRS, child safety restraint system, wasn't adjusted properly. And as we've mentioned in previous podcasts, this issue keeps rearing its ugly head. We most recently, earlier this year, there was a similar death on board a New Jersey school bus. A bus aide is up on manslaughter charges for not paying attention to that student. We have another case happen a few years ago in Florida. So this is an ongoing issue. I know the folks that I work with in putting together the agenda are really just shaking their heads on this one, thinking like, how are we still seeing these same mistakes, these deadly mistakes happen? So there's going to be a general session on that. Stay tuned, folks. We have some more updates in the works right now. Not quite ready to unveil them, but some potentially more keynotes and interesting general sessions being planned. So again, head over to tsdconference.com. Check out the latest and greatest on this all-important conference coming up in November. And before we get into our interview a little bit later with Taylor Ekbektani and Robert Leach and Tyson Decluette from Fountain-Fort Carson School District in Colorado, Tony has these words from our sponsor.
Well, the votes are in and STN Expo attendees have spoken. TransFinder was overwhelmingly selected as the best software and best hardware for 2023 at STN Expo in Reno, Nevada. Yes, you heard that right. For the first time ever, TransFinder received the Innovation Choice Award for best hardware. And for the second year in a row, TransFinder has won the best software award, adding to numerous past past awards TransFinder has won for its software products. TransFinder's move into hardware was driven by client demand. TransFinder now provides the tablet, the mounts, the card reader, and more as part of its one partner, one solution approach. Guys, you can learn more by visiting transfinder.com or calling them at 800-373-3609 or email them at getplus@transfinder.com and make sure you put ST and podcast in the subject line.
All right, guys, we are back and I have two very special guests. So I'm very excited to introduce these guys. We have Tyson Decluette and Director of Transportation, Robert Leach, and they are from Fountain-Fort Carson School District number 8 in Colorado. And I looked it up and I believe you guys are a little south of Denver, kind of right outside of Colorado Springs-ish area. But welcome. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And you guys might have seen an article or two about these guests. They've been hitting the media cycle by storm, but Tyson is actually the youngest school bus driver in the district or the state.
No, I think it's the district. I have heard of other districts in Colorado that have hired under 21-year-old air-aged drivers.
Okay. So the district, and that's in eternity or just currently?
Just currently.
Okay. That's cool. So yeah. Tyson, why don't you kind of take it away? I know, how did you get started in the industry? I know it kind of started from a school project. So if you kind of want to talk about that a little bit.
So during the 2021-2022 school year, I started at Welty Education Center, which is basically kind of like a credit recovery kind of school. And I was very short on my credits. And I was looking at possibly not graduating that year because of how short I was on credits. And when, how throughout the year, schools do like practice tests before the actual big test to see, like SAT but it wasn't SAT down here. I forgot what it was called. But I could never pass any of those tests because I always freaked out. I didn't know what I was looking at. And anything I would learn over the school year went right out the window. It was usually gone. And one day I was approached by one of my teachers proposing a project that would, I would go through all of the courses, you take in high school, science, English, math, but it was basically a big project as transportation because all year I went in and that's all I talked about was transportation. I had a passion for buses ever since I was little. And the math portion was basically living off of a bus driver's salary or, making money as a bus driver, see if you could live independently. The English portion was looking at different perspectives of accessibility to transportation. That was one of the big things that was on my mind for English. For people who had access that didn't really need it, but people who didn't have access that really did need it. The science portion was looking at all sorts of engines, what's better for the environment. And that was pretty much it. It was a decent project. Wasn't expecting it to go this far, though.
Yeah. So did you actually, kind of report and find data on these different aspects?
I did. So everything that I had learned throughout the school year was put into the project. I had a budget project in math, even way before this project was even a thought. And it was basically if we lived off of $15 an hour, having to find an apartment by yourself, car, groceries, try and keep yourself entertained. Basically, all the necessities you would need to live independently. To see if you would be able to live independently off of minimum wage. So that definitely went towards it because at that time there were a lot of companies hiring at minimum wage for new drivers and stuff like that. And throughout the whole year, I was never really good at science, but the one thing that I always was fascinated in was trying to, how a lot of companies and a lot of agencies or manufacturers are trying to come out with all these electric vehicles and trying to replace older diesel ones.
Okay. So is there any key findings that you can share with us? Anything that jumped out to you?
So some things that did jump out to me was definitely during literacy. We use Marxist criticism, which is basically, in this case, would be people who have accessibility to transportation, and the people who are known as have-nots, which do not have access to accessibility. And you would see with a lot of transportation down here in Colorado Springs, at that time, before a lot of routes were reinstated, because a lot of them were suspended due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we definitely saw that there was some areas that definitely needed some accessibility, while some areas I didn't really find necessary to have accessibility, but I don't work for Mountain Metro, so I can't speak for them. And when you look at the school transportation, the school district, basically, you would see that we have a lot of accessibility for a lot of families and stuff, you know. And that was one thing that kind of really stuck out, was that Marxist criticism has for the district has a lot of accessibility and a lot of inaccessibility.
Okay. So this project, prompted you to apply to become a driver, or how did that kind of happen?
So I've always kind of knew I wanted to be a bus driver since I was little. And this one was actually funny. So one day we were bringing in U-Hauls to go on a trip, and I kind of made it like a little joke. I was like, I'm using the U-Haul like if I'm driving a bus, because I gotta wait until I'm 21 and stuff. I came back and I was speaking to our fleet supervisor, Johnny, and I was talking about how I was, using the U-Haul as a school bus because, I've always wanted to be a bus driver. And he was like, so why don't you become a bus driver? I said, don't you have to be 21? He was like, no, who said that? I was like, everyone. Everyone was saying I had to be 21. And he was like, no, go speak with Robert and, see what he says. And at first I was scared too, because I was like, Robert's going to tell me I have to be 21. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste his time. And when I approached him, he was like, yeah, that's it's not true. If you are willing to go get your permit and put, all the dedication towards getting your permit, we'll hire you on as a driver, because we're trying to, lower the hiring age for drivers. But, it kind of caught me by surprise that he was what I was hearing, because I was like, are you sure? like you can even ask him. You can ask a lot of people here. I was very hesitant because I thought that I was going to go and do it, and then I get told something different.
Okay. But it ended up all working out, because I believe you're 19, right? So
I'm 20. When I was hired on as a driver, I was 19.
Gotcha. Okay. So what was that kind of process or going through it, getting your CDL?
So, I had met a lot of great people here ever since I started here at District 8. A lot of them were willing to help me, get everything, ready for my permit test. I told them how bad I had test anxiety. I could do well now, but I feel like once I go for my actual permit, it'll just go out the window, and I'm not going to be able to do it. So at first, when I had scheduled it, I thought I was ready. I wasn't ready, so I rescheduled it the second time, and I was like, okay. I was told by some trainers I should do each test individually, because there's 4 tests I had to do. I had to do the general knowledge, school bus endorsement, air brake endorsement, and passenger endorsement. And I didn't want to keep going back to the DMV. I just wanted to see if I can get at least part of it done. But my main goal was to try and get it done in one day. Mm-hmm. And leading up to December, which was when my appointment was, I went home every night, studied, for at least an hour. And as it was getting closer, I just felt like I can't do this. I started freaking out. I was like, I can't do this. I can't. The air brakes is going to be difficult. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just going to go back and just tell them I can't do this. I'll just stay as a monitor. It's not even that worth it to me. But I continued to tell myself I can do it because I was passing more and more tests every day. And then when it was time for the actual test, I actually surprised myself by passing every test in one day.
Wow. So you started as a monitor while you were still in high school?
No. So I was hired on right after I graduated high school.
Okay.
It was about 2 weeks before I graduated. I had a monitor who still works here as my monitor. I was asking her like, okay, so what all do I need, to do to, be a bus monitor? Because, at the time, this is the crazy part. At the time, I didn't even have my regular license. So I didn't want to travel too far from the house to go to work because I went through something like that during the school year and I didn't like it. So I was like, this is right, not too far from where I live. So I'm like, I'll just, apply to be a monitor. And she said, go ahead and put in an application. And I did. And I came in for an interview. And about later that week, I was told that I had the job. And it felt good because I knew I had a job, getting out of high school.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And July of that year, July 2022 is when I started training. And I started my official day as a monitor at the beginning of the school year.
So you took District 8 school buses to school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really gone full circle for you.
Yeah, it really did. It's crazy to think about, like when I was taking the bus home, like literally a year later, I would be driving them.
Yeah. Okay. So when did you start as a school bus driver then? What, month was that year?
So when I started driving the buses for training was January, but when I actually started driving routes, so actually picking up kids was February.
Okay. So what has been your experience, being an actual school bus driver and, obviously being young and just out of high school? Have you had some, behavior problems with the kids, or has it been kind of smooth sailing?
I have run into a group of kids who, kids, they're going to try and test. They see somebody new that they're not used to, and they're going to try and test them. But I took all the experience I took as a monitor into as a driver. And it's been pretty smooth sailing throughout the school year. Even for summer school, it's pretty smooth sailing. If I see a kid, that needs to, sit down or whatever, I take all the experience as when I was a monitor into that moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what would you say is your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job is, depends on who you're talking to. You could be talking to my adult side. I was just like, I'm making some good money, saving up for so many great things I've been doing. I got, so many good things I did so far. I got my own car finally. But if you're talking to my inner child, it is excited to be driving the school buses because, I always wanted to drive buses, but.
Okay, awesome. So is this something that you plan on continuing and moving up in transportation?
Yeah, I plan on moving up, which is crazy because, I've moved up so much in this 1 year, and I'm still trying to move up. I applied for one of our positions, our over-the-road positions, and I just hope that I can continue to move up from there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, when the story came out, we saw you posted a YouTube video, through the district. And so we posted it on our Facebook and we got so many comments, people saying, oh, I started driving at 18 or, 21, whatever their state allowed. And now they've been in the industry over 20 years, some even over 40 years. So kind of switching, to Robert, you're serving as the director of transportation. What was your kind of story? How did you get started in the industry?
Yeah, so it's a great question because in a lot of ways, it's very similar. I moved to Colorado from the Midwest in 2010, so right during the recession. I'm from the West, born and raised in California. And so our family wanted to get back to the western part of the United States. But coming to Colorado Springs, I was not able to find a job. I had been running my own business, internet-based business, but that wasn't not making enough money to support, a wife and 4 kids. But then I noticed driving by, like so many people driving by a school district, by a bus barn, a sign saying now hiring bus drivers. And I thought that might actually work because it's a split shift. And in the middle of the day, I could be working on developing my business and then be driving in the morning and the afternoon and get, districts offer these wonderful benefits, this great benefits package, and be able to get health insurance and the things that I needed. So I applied to be a bus driver, and it was about 2012, and went through the training, just like Tyson did, became a driver, picked a route, and started driving. And I, at the time, was just thinking to myself, this is just going to help pay the bills and provide some benefits. And I was just absolutely pleasantly surprised how much I enjoyed just driving the bus. Still just absolutely love it. The window open, the wind in my hair, the diesel turbocharged engine, having fun with the kids and telling jokes. And, in Colorado Springs, you're driving around this just beautiful area where you have Pikes Peak in the background. And it's just can be, and I don't want to romanticize it, but I will. It's just very magical. Loved it so much that I got into an accident my first month driving, tail swing accident. We all know what those are like. And my director at the time says, "Hey, now you're ready to be a trainer." And so set my sights on being a trainer and became a trainer and then a trainer supervisor. And then eventually I was the director of transportation for Cherry Creek School District up in Denver. And we went into COVID and there was a little slump in employment, and then became the transportation supervisor here at Fountain-Fort Carson School District. And then a year later became the director.
Okay.
So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. So you're looking at what, 10 years? A little more?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow. So what was your reaction, when Tyson came to you and was like, "Hey, like, how old do I have to be a school bus driver?" I'm kind of thinking about it.
I mean, I was like 18, absolutely. So, and the story was the same. He said, "Well, people said I had to be 21." And I was like, "Well, you probably should just come talk to me about these things and not ask what other people think about it." 18, I personally had never moved somebody as young as Tyson through the process. So I was very intrigued about what that would look like, how the district would manage that. But I knew that according to the Colorado Commercial Driver's Manual, that 18 with the K restriction on your license, you could drive a commercial vehicle.
Okay. So looking at like the district as a whole, are you guys in a school bus driver shortage, going into this next school year?
Well, it's always a numbers game. I was just looking at the numbers yesterday, and it looks like I'm going to have 2 extra drivers going into the new school district. That doesn't mean I'll have all my positions filled that HR will allow me to fill, but I will have 2 extra drivers, and all of my routes are covered. But you know how this is. I don't sleep really well at night because one day I have 2 extra drivers, and then the next day 2 people have decided to retire. And you're constantly in this seesaw game. It can be a little bit stressful of trying to figure out whether you're going to be covering or staff's going to be driving going into the new school year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you still have your CDL?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. So you still drive as needed?
I do. Absolutely.
Awesome. So, what would be some advice, and either of you guys or both of you guys can take this, to get more younger people in the door? Because it seems like the people who are directors now started as school bus drivers. And I don't know if necessarily we're seeing that as much, these younger 18-year-old, 20-year-olds, coming in to be a driver. So what advice or what hiring incentives do you guys think, districts should think about or employ?
Yeah, and I'm happy to jump in on that one. I mean, I wrote an online blog for you folks a couple of years ago. One was called Recruiting Great Drivers, and the other was called Coaching Great Drivers. And, I wrote back in one of those initial articles about removing barriers that are either part of the system, inherent to the system, part of law, but, working on removing barriers and enabling folks to be able to drive, creating opportunities. And I think Tyson's the case in point. I think that there was a lot of people that just naturally thought, absolutely not, can an 18-year-old drive a commercial vehicle?
Mm-hmm.
But the other approach is, well, why not? And what can we do to remove the barrier so somebody like Tyson can drive?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of interview teams, hiring teams, approach that interview process of, why should we let you drive a school bus? And I've always come at it from the approach of, why shouldn't you drive a school bus? My own experience was, it's amazing, and I want you to have that same experience. So let me create an opportunity and give you all the resources you need to be a successful bus driver. I have several applications now that have come in where folks do not have a high school diploma and they do not have a GED. And so our job description requires one or the other. Well, we're asking the question, is it really necessary, or why do we have that requirement? Is there an opportunity for us to bring somebody on as a bus driver today with the expectation that you'll get your GED in a year, and we're going to give you the tools and empower you to get your GED? So you'll be a better bus driver, a better citizen, all of those things. So the approach has really been the same, with just removing barriers, having a training team that they could take anybody and train them to be an exceptional bus driver.
Mm-hmm. Tyson, do you want to jump in on that a little bit?
So, as Robert had said before, a lot of people question whether an 18-year-old could drive a school bus or not. And ever since, all these stories have came out, about me becoming a driver, I've been getting a lot of positive messages, a lot of negative messages. A lot of people have said that, I should be 21 in order for their children to, be on the bus. And, I always ask myself, I wonder why that is. And a lot of them say it's because, inexperience. And I say, okay, well, take this into consideration. When you're starting off at 21, you don't instantly learn how to, drive a commercial vehicle. No matter what, you're going to be inexperienced. That's how you learn, and that's how you grow. And I've been taking a lot of the comments and just making myself better, making myself, more try and stand out to if, somebody who is my age that feels like a lot of people are going to be, kind of just talking, bad about them. And I say that, don't listen to what those people have to say, because, as long as you feel like you can do it, that's all that matters in the end. And that's why that's how I feel I've been doing is, if I didn't feel like I couldn't do it, I wouldn't be a driver right now. I'd probably still be a monitor. Yes, it's scary, driving a huge vehicle down the road, and children's lives are in the driver's hands. But one thing that I think that I wish a lot of people understood was that if the driver wasn't allowed to do it, they wouldn't have been hired on as a driver. And that's why we have, like for me right now, the K restriction. I can't drive out of the state of Colorado until the age of 21. There's laws and there is, restrictions for a reason. And the state is 18 plus. So the state is, saying, if you want to hire on somebody who's 18, you can. Like everything that is being set right now is happening for a reason. And I just kind of wish a lot of people would, take the time to realize that before, they try and talk down to somebody.
Mm-hmm. And just really quickly, Robert, have you had to field any of those phone calls from parents that are like, hey, this driver is too young, or I don't feel comfortable with my child being on this bus?
No, absolutely not. Not one call. I mean, I've seen some of the comments on Facebook, and we address that by pointing out the legality of having an 18-year-old drive.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing it's worth mentioning, all of my general ed buses do have monitors on board. We're one of the few districts that have that. And so having an experienced monitor, to support Tyson in his driving, they work together as a team to deal with any student behavioral issues, but also anything in an emergency that comes up. So we're very fortunate in this district to be able to have that, to put a team on every bus. But no, in fact, I think that I've heard some comments that people just really appreciate Tyson, his professionalism, his always on time. He's very committed to the job, and he just comes at it with a tenacity that very few people are willing to put into the position.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm so happy that you guys were able to jump on. I know your story, Tyson, sparked a lot of interest on our Facebook page and just people sharing their stories. So, I hopefully it will inspire more people out there to become school bus drivers as well. But thank you both for jumping on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
A special thanks to Ryan, Taylor, Robert, and Tyson for joining us on this week's episode of the STN Podcast. We also appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder, IC Bus, and Safely. Guys, don't forget that deadline for the TSD conference to save $100 with that super early bird deadline. Going to be an amazing conference here November 15th through the 20th down in Dallas, Texas, Frisco, suburb of North Dallas. Can't wait to see you there. So much good stuff happening. TSDconference.com for all the information on that, the latest agenda updates. Also, STNonline.com for all the latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. Don't forget, guys, you can listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. We love you. We'll see you next week.